I wanted to be a member of the most powerful clique in school.
Dear Diary, Heather said she teaches people real life.
You were nothing before you met me. You were a Girl Scout cookie.
Does it not bother you that everybody in this school thinks that you're Verona? Like I give a shit.
Heather number one just looked right at me. You a Heather?
No, I'm a Veronica. I don't really like my friends.
I don't really like your friends either.
They're people I work with, and our job is being popular.
Maybe it's time to take a vacation.
I just killed my best friend.
And your worst enemy.
Same difference. My teen angst has a body count. This was a tragic thing.
Hallelujah.
We scare people into not being assholes. What did you say, dickhead?
I did not want them dead.
You did too.
Did not shut up.
I love my dead gay son.
You were out of control. That knife is filthy.
What do you think I'm gonna do with it? Take out her tonsils? Ha! Is this as good for you as it is for me?
Life can suck.
That's it. We're breaking up.
Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. Welcome back to Movie Club. On tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about how a 1989 satire film became one of the most controversial movies ever made about the high school experience, and how a 1999 school shooting completely changes the way we look at media like this forever. We're going to be talking about all that and more on tonight's episode. I'm your host and curator around these parts, Patrick Smith. And this is Movie Club. Roll the intro, Michael! Hello everyone, and welcome back to Movie Club. Tonight we're tackling the 1989 Black as Pitch comedy from director Michael Lehmann, Heathers. Now, Heathers is a tough film to talk about because of all the baggage that comes with it. But in 1989, this was a critically lauded film. Its comedy was incredibly incisive and took what is typically the social politics of high school and blew them up to an incredible degree. Because this film dares to ask the question, what if the everyday social politics of high school, which feels like life and death, actually was that? The difference between life and death. I think you can see where this is going, and we've got a lot to talk about, so I've got to speed through some of this. But let's talk about this film's production history and all the people that were involved in making it the cult hit that it is now. Screenwriter Daniel Waters wrote this film as kind of an homage to the incisive comedies, most of them very dark black comedies, from Kubrick. Specifically, the films Dr. Strangelove and some of the more comedic elements in Full Metal Jacket. And I think you can, if you remember when we screened at least Dr. Strangelove, those movies are incredibly dark. They dare to broach subjects that are quite taboo, and for this film, nothing is really off limits. Heathers premiered January 21st, 1989 at the Sundance Film Festival, and later hit theaters wide in March of the same year. However, it did not succeed at making back its $3 million budget, only making about a third of that in its initial run. It has since then become its incredible cult hit and has inspired a wide variety of adaptations that have followed. One of my favorite films that kind of spawned out of the ideas and dark humor that Heathers had back in 1989 is the 2017 dark comedy Tragedy Girls, in which a duo of teen girls decide to create a blog about murders that happen locally. The issue is that all of those murders are theirs. They're the ones killing them to create content for their website. Yeah, it's an incisive comedy about social media and how that affects us, especially at our teen years. But Heathers was doing this all the way back in 1989. Not necessarily about, social media, but how we interacted with one another and the hierarchies that are in high schools and those different cliques, and how eventually there's going to be some resistance to those ideas. And Heathers, well, it takes it a bit farther than most of us might be comfortable with. And if it wasn't for the incredibly incisive comedy that still is so incredibly funny to this day that's in Heathers, without that, this would be a very disturbing and depressing movie to watch. Without this being a satire piece, this would just be another school tragedy. And as much as I really don't want to talk about this, I think it's necessary to, I believe, talk about the baggage that this film holds now. In 1989, this film was incredibly funny and teenagers absolutely loved it. And it slowly became a cult hit, and, it's still admired as an incredibly funny piece of comedy that was very deeply rooted in the culture of the time, much of which is still very insightful comedy. But 10 years after this film premiered, in 1999, we had one of the most tragic things ever happen in a school. And this event has so seismically shaped pop culture since then that I would be remiss to not mention it and discuss it and how it affects our viewing of this film. So for the next 3 minutes, I'm going to be talking about the Columbine High School massacre. And if you're uncomfortable for that, I will wave my hand when I'm done with that. So you can mute this video and then come back when I wave both my hands at you. So just be looking for that. For the rest of you, here we go. Just under 10 years after the premiere of Heathers, on April 20th, 1999, two kids walked into Columbine High School with the intention to murder most of their classmates. And even though now our reality, especially in high schools and academic settings, is more conditioned to the idea of school shootings, this kind of material can feel maybe a bit insensitive. But at the time that this film was made, they didn't have the foreknowledge of knowing that this would be something they'd have to be dealing with in the future. In a way, it does make this film a lot more difficult as a view now. And I think to ignore that, to not say that out loud, to not, honor the people that lost their lives back in 1999 and have lost their lives in subsequent school shootings, I think I would be failing you as a critic, as someone who aspires to take this job seriously, to prepare you for these screenings, and to not present you the baggage that this film holds because of these events that at the time they made this film had no idea would happen. That's how things work. You can interpret media long ago with our current circumstances. In fact, it might present an incredibly different reading than you ever thought possible. In much the same way, when I finally read through and watched the film Carrie, the film by Brian De Palma, based on the novel by Stephen King, I can't help but, as I'm sitting there reading and consuming both the film and the book, not coming into contact with this school shooter mentality, this idea of us watching a domino effect of issues that are happening with a particular small subset of kids who feel like they're on the outside of the social cliques and take drastic action to alter said social cliques. And in a film where they murder people who have created these social constructs that damage relationships and hurt people. It's hard in a 2021 context to not look back on this film and see some of those real life events in this movie, and to not feel a little bit apprehensive about laughing at some of it. Holds now.
Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. Future Patrick here. I wanted to clarify something really quickly because I don't feel like I got to it in this video. And that is simply that I don't want it to come off that I'm saying that art like this and media like this creates violence in the real world. In fact, there's plenty of academic studies and scientific studies that I'm going to link in the basement downstairs that will prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that that's actually not the case. In fact, media like this typically, scientifically and academically, has been proven to let off some steam for people. And so the idea, despite what your Congress people might try and tell you, that violent video games or violent movies like this actually perpetuate violence or cause people to think more violent thoughts, or to, actually go out and do some of the stuff and replicate some of that, there's just no basis in fact for that. And I want to make sure that's crystal clear here, that I'm not saying that this movie at any point, maybe inspired the killings that happened at Columbine. I wanted to make that crystal clear that that's just not how things tend to work in the real world. Of course, there are outliers that they're going to blame this kind of stuff, but in reality, more often than not, media like this doesn't cause more real-world violence. Back to past Patrick.
And honestly, all I can say is that's part of, I think, why this film is so important to watch. It's forcing us to engage with a very uncomfortable thing, but the dialogue it's trying to start as a satire piece is important. It just has the misfortune of having real-life events that feel closely mirrored to this. Okay, please come back. I'm done talking about that. I just thought it was important to give you a lens to view this film through. I totally understand that for some people it's too uncomfortable to engage with this film in that way. And if you not being able to engage with, I think, what could easily be considered a topic warning, this film might not be the one for you. You might want to skip this. For as good of a film as it is, if it's going to bring up some really traumatic feelings or some PTSD in you, I think this is the perfect time to say, I'm out. And that's totally reasonable. I understand that not every film is a comfortable viewing experience for everyone. And for some people, there are some deep-rooted issues that this film could only exacerbate. And I don't want that to ever be a thing for you. So, if you need to leave now, this is the perfect time. Next week, we'll have a completely normal film with Pride and Prejudice, which should not bother anybody. But I did want to engage with this film in this way. And since this film is in the Four Loves in February series, you might be wondering, what am I talking about? How does this film fit into that series? And I would argue this film exemplifies eros, or erotic, passion-driven love. That's also one of the four main Greek types of love, and eros is all over this film. Because at the heart of this film is a romance between Winona Ryder's character and Christian Slater's character. The problem is that this is a relationship that the power dynamic is completely skewed in favor of the guy, and the things that he's able to get her to do because of the power he lauds over her, and because of him having an incredibly incisive brain that is able to manipulate Veronica into doing these awful things, there's a lot going on here. And it's clear that this love is mostly driven out of passion, and not necessarily any real, true feelings that could be easily defined or understood. I would argue that most relationships in high school are this type of love. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but eventually you have to come to a maturity level and understand that that's not the kind of love that is something that's sustainable. It is a firework, a Roman candle that will light up the night sky and then dissipate as quickly as it came. Sure, there are the outliers. There are the exceptions that prove the rule. And I'm happy for those people. But this is a film that I would argue is about Eros love. But more specifically, this film is about social politics of high school becoming deadly. So let's talk about it. But we need to talk about, before we can start to unpack what I think this film does so well with its comedy and its satire, is this incredible cast. Winona Ryder plays our lead, Veronica, who is loosely associated with the clique-like group Heathers, who effectively are like the mean girls of the school who are in charge of, you know, the social politics, the hierarchy ladder in high school, this high school here. And in comes JD, who upsets the balance of everything and gets Winona Ryder's character to fall head over heels for him. This passionate romance leads to JD proposing a scheme to completely upset the way that the hierarchy in high school is. And at first it seems innocent. And then his supposed prank goes horribly wrong and someone dies.
My teen angst bullshit has a body count.
At this point, Ryder's Veronica is completely in over her head and has to figure out some way to fix this. And that leads us to one of the most interesting and incredibly darkly funny comedies I've ever had the pleasure of seeing. And this is made all the more impressive by the fact that Ryder was only 16 years old at the time of filming. And she was just coming off her pretty fantastic role in 1988's Beetlejuice from director Tim Burton.
Beetle breakfast, the beetle drink, beetle juice.
That's it!
Name's Beetlejuice. That role was just sort of like a cartoon, you know. I didn't, you know, it was more fun than anything else.
In many ways, these two films, Beetlejuice and Heathers, are the start of Ryder's launch and skyrocket into fame. And it's just the precursor to how incredible of an actress she's about to become. This is also what makes it so interesting that she has been cast in Stranger Things, a show that is completely an homage to all things 80s. When in fact, Ryder's career was only just really getting started in 1988, the tail end of the 80s. It really wasn't until the 90s that she really came into her own and was making a ridiculous amount of movies. But in fact, her agent, when she was cast for Heathers, told her that this would be career suicide. Ironic given the subject matter of the film.
I'd actually just gone through something where a girl had committed suicide who was, you know, called everything from a freak, a witch, you know, just a girl who dressed differently and who was kind of goth. And she committed suicide in my school. And then as soon as she committed suicide, everybody was talking about how great she was and saying that they were friends, and her funeral was huge. And it was like, and then I got the script, and you know, it just really struck me because I was so disgusted with the behavior of my school.
Ryder luckily did not listen to that agent, because that would have been an incredibly stupid move, and I think would have made this film worse than it is. This film probably still would have been great, but Ryder's incredible acting abilities here make it very easy to empathize and to really care for Veronica and her plight, and root for her to find a way out of it. Opposite Ryder, playing JD, the other main character, and pretty easily the antagonist of the whole kit and caboodle, is Christian Slater. And man, does he play a great bad guy. Like, wow. I honestly didn't think he was still doing consistent work, but he's been working with Disney in all kinds of other voice acting roles and quite a few film roles as well in recent years. So, good for him. But especially in this film, he's so fun to watch. There are very few bad guys who act quite the way that Slater does in this film. And it makes sense because he's modeling most of this off of the acting styles of Jack Nicholson. And I think when you watch this film, that'll become crystal clear as you watch through just how he turns and becomes this darkly humorous but brooding bad guy. You might be wondering at this point, if you've never seen this film, why is it called Heathers? Well, Heathers is the clique that kind of runs the school. A group of girls who go by the name Heather, who are effectively in charge of how everything is run. And they keep everybody in their place, in their position, and in line. Fellow Beetlejuice actor and Alabama native Glenn Shaddix also joins writer here, and one of the most enigmatic characters in the entire picture, who has one of the best and most iconic lines from this film that I dare not ruin for you here. Because one of the things that I do think makes the incredibly dark tone of this film work alongside its really dark humor is how ridiculous some of these characters are, how over the top they are. It's very clear that everything is being played up and that it is over exaggerative for a reason. It makes it very easy to hate the bad characters and to like the good characters and to somewhat empathize with the characters that fall somewhere in the gray area in between. You might be a little bit surprised to see Phil Lewis here from The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, but he makes an appearance as well. And honestly, this film is really just a grab bag of fantastic character actors from the 80s. And some young stars on their way to success. When I first watched this film, just last year, I was completely gobsmacked that something like this could have ever been made. But especially was like, well, I'm glad it was made when it was, because there's no chance that this thing could ever be redone now. Only to eat my words 5 minutes later when I realized, oh right, there's a musical version of this.
Shut your eyes tight till you vanish from sight. Let nothing remain. Freeze your brain.
Heathers the musical began its run off-Broadway back in 2014, ended its final show back in 2018 on West End. Much like its predecessor, it retains all the dark comedy, but adds in a bunch of high-powered, really fun songs that only make the jokes from the original that much funnier, in my opinion. Because now it's so much easier to laugh. We were already in a heightened reality in the film, and this is a heightened reality of a heightened reality because it's a musical. It makes it that much easier to engage with the material and understand what is really the film is in the musical are getting at underneath all that satire. And that's important, because I do think this film opens up some really great conversations about abusive relationships, bullying, school hierarchies, and much, much more. To sort of prove my point, Paramount Network tried to mount their own adaptation of this film with a 2018 premiere date for their television adaptation of Heathers, only to be stopped by the famous Parkland shooting. And at that point, it's pretty tough to premiere the show at all. And in 2019, they canceled the show completely together. So there was never a second season. And that's completely understandable, because honestly, the climate is only getting worse and worse to have films like this. The satire can feel like edgy humor at times, especially when we're really close to a school shooting. And it makes this film a tough thing to touch or talk about. I say all this to say, the 1989 film Heathers, directed by Michael Lehmann and written by Daniel Waters, is a brilliant black comedy that deserves commendation. It's a cult hit for a reason, and I think it's worth engaging with it. And I hope that you see it as funny as I do, and understand the satire at the center of it. But hopefully, you're also able to engage with it through the other lenses that I provided for you tonight, and to understand why this film is such a complicated viewing experience. Regardless, if you've chosen to stick around tonight, I really do hope that you enjoy tonight's film, because it is a blast, and it's so much fun if you truly give yourself to it. And so, without further ado, I welcome you to the halls of high school once again, as we dig into the 1989 Michael Lehmann directed, Daniel Waters penned